Welcome back. This is the Ben Shapiro Show. So, big story of the day. President Trump is now talking about putting giant tariffs on Mexican goods coming into the United States. He says he's doing so in order to lower illegal immigration, or at least force the Mexican government to crack down on illegal immigration. Joining us on the line is Tori Whiting. She's a trade economist at the Heritage Foundation. She worked also in the Center for International Trade and Economics at the Heritage Foundation. Tori, thanks so much for joining the Ben Shapiro Show. Really appreciate your time.
Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
So, Tori, maybe you can explain what exactly are the, number one, what's the policy? What is Trump seeking to do here?
Well, really, I think what the crux of the issue is, Ben, is that the president is identifying that Congress has failed to do its job in reforming our immigration system and coming up with good immigration policy that keeps America safe and also allows for legal immigration. And that's the real crux of the issue. Unfortunately, the policies that are being put forward are not really getting at the root of the problem.
Okay, well, the policies that Trump is talking about are obviously tariffs. Now, tariffs are effectively a tax on American consumers. He's talking about presumably creating a 5% tariff immediately, and then basically every 3 weeks or a month that illegal immigration is not stopped. He now says that he is going to raise that 5% by 5%. So it'll cap out at 25%, which of course imposes a massive cost on American business. I guess the big question is here, why does Trump think this is going to work? I mean, what are the flaws in his thinking here?
Well, I think that the president has two sort of flawed thinkings when it comes to trade policy. The first is that he believes that trade is a zero-sum game. So essentially that if someone else is winning, America is losing. And so in order for us to win, we have to make others lose. The other issue is that he sees the economy or the gains from trade similar to how Democrats see how individuals can benefit from the economy. So he sees it as a pie that never grows, that can only be sliced up different ways, whereas really the pie is always growing and there's more and more to go around. So what we want to do is and the Heritage Foundation has come out with great research in this area, what we want to do is try and encourage immigration reform and also the administration to be working with Mexico, not against Mexico, to solve this crisis.
Well, if the economy of Mexico were to tank, obviously it would send more illegal immigrants up through the border. Again, that wall would be highly useful at this point. So given that this is not good for the economy, what do you think that the prospects for economic growth look like? So far, the tariff policy that President Trump has pursued have not done significant damage to economic growth. Right now, the stock market has basically been tanking. It's been having a really rough ride of it ever since President Trump announced tariffs on China. Though those tariffs, at least I think, are somewhat justifiable given the fact that China cheats on trade on a regular basis and they are a geopolitical adversary of the United States, whereas Mexico isn't quite an adversary. But the prospects of the economy look to be slowing. President Trump can't afford that going into 2020.
Absolutely. And we're seeing some indications of that with some changes in bond yields and investors wanting to switch over to buy government bonds, which are traditionally a very safe investment. So that signals to us that investors are worried about a potential downturn. I think in order to avoid that, the president really needs to couple his wonderful pro-growth tax policy with deregulation, with free trade. And those three things together can help us get sustainable economic growth above 3%. But when trade is working against those other pro-growth policies, it's just not going to work out where we're going to have that sustainable growth.
We're talking to Tori Whiting. She's a trade economist at the Heritage Foundation. Now, Tori, one of the things that's worth noting here is that there's been a broader strain inside the Republican Party, inside the conservative movement that seems to be against free trade on principle. Maybe you can explain to folks why this is a particularly bad idea.
Yes, well, I mean, first of all, what's very encouraging is that all of the polling out there in regards to how Americans in general feel about trade is actually pretty positive. More Americans on the right and the left approve of free trade than restricted trade, and even independence as well. So what you've seen is kind of a little bit of a flip. More Democrats support free trade and fewer Republicans support free trade. But what we need to be doing as conservatives is communicating to the American people and to the administration that there are immense gains from trade. And a lot of that comes from imports. More than 2/3 of everything we import every year is considered an intermediate good. So our manufacturers use it to make other things, and that makes them more competitive, and that's a good thing. then we really need to be encouraging these policies and just getting out there into the country and communicating this message.
Well, Tori Whiting, trade economist at Heritage Foundation, thanks so much for stopping by and giving us a little bit more information on what President Trump is doing as far as trade policy. Appreciate your time.